Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Another Adult Podcast. I'm your host, Howard Cam. And if you're a fellow Gen Xer, high school teacher, or just someone who's fed up with the everyday absurdities of life, you've come to the right place. Now, you might be wondering, what's this show all about? Well, it's pretty simple. You send in your questions, and I give you my unfiltered, off the cuff answers. So if you're ready for some real talk, a few laughs, or maybe in a moment of, yeah, I feel that, then stick around. Let's dive into the glorious world of being an annoyed adult. So our first question is teaching worth it? And how do you determine if you're cut out for it? So this person is a high school senior and they want to be a teacher. They want to be a secondary education English teacher. Uh, and for whatever reasons, they feel that they might not make it in this career. They talk about school climate, they talk about AI among students and attention spans, and they worry that they're not going to make it. Oh, okay. All right, listen up. Pull up a chair and sit down. Okay? Because whining about AI and attention spans are just buzzwords. And I've seen enough of these two buzzwords to know they're just a couple of toys that kids have been handled, right? Let's just cut to it and get to the meat of this issue. First, let me ask you a hard question. Do you even know what it means to be an English teacher? Because if your answer is, I'll just read some literature and hope the kid gets it, then you're about as prepared as a freshman who thinks learning how to write an essay is just filling out a form. Because teaching isn't about being the, wise sage who drops facts like confetti. It's about wrestling kids into making sense of the world and then letting them keep that fight in their own heads for an entire lifetime. That's why you need to get, a thick skin and you have grit and this willingness to just kind of throw out the whole just get through school attitude. In short, is teaching worth it? Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to like put in the work, right? But the long answer is it's a, it's a roller coaster, right? That makes you question your sanity at least once a week, right? But if you're the type who loves seeing someone light up when they finally crack a poem or an essay that you've given them, and they see the argument in like some novels, then you're on the right track, right? If you feel your soul burn when someone says, "I understand now," then that kind of like fuel just keeps me alive, and it should keep you alive too. And if you're worried about AI, right, and the attention spans, let's break that down. Because AI is a tool and it's not a replacement. I mean, sure, right? Kids can copy and paste answers from ChatGPT, but they can't understand them. And that's important to know. You're not teaching the next generation how to type, you're teaching them why they're typing. Because if a kid can't articulate why a character acts a certain way, then you failed even before AI gets involved. And the point is, if you're comfortable with technology, you'll adapt to it. And if not, then you're kind of already out of the game. And attention spans are short things, but focus is a teachable thing. Because kids today can stare at a screen for hours, right? You look at them, they stare at their cell phones, they play video games, and they do that shit for hours at a time. They can scroll for hours on end. But you have to teach them how to shift their focus, to read and to analyze. That's part of your job. You have to help them with that. And if you can't explain why a short story matters, then you're not going to help them keep their attention span anyway. So if you're still on the fence after hearing all of that, then it's time to ask yourself more brutal questions. First, I mean, do you have the courage to deal with a room full of 14-year-olds? Because high schoolers are not your average polite audience, right? They're this living, breathing group of potential, politicians and rock stars or procrastinating adults. And then you'll have to manage all these classroom politics and the parent complaints and the occasional student who thinks, oh, I'm going to do a better job at the cafeteria than I do in class, right? If you can't handle that, you're not cut out. All right. Two, are you patient enough to deal with learning curves? Because you're not just teaching English, you're teaching this process of thinking. You're teaching, you know, you're teaching these kids how to think. And that means students are going to make mistakes. They're going to repeat these mistakes. And then sometimes they're going to roll their eyes at you for explaining the same thing over and over again. And patience is not a skill you pick up on day one. It's built by watching your kids, or more realistic, by seeing students struggle until they finally get it. And if you're the type who says, stop messing around and yells when a kid repeats a mistake, you're kind of going to lose them before you even get to the point. And then three, like, do you have enough empathy to be a role model? Because you said you want to be you know, a, a, a positive figure in a child's life. And even if they have a terrible home, because kids, I mean, for the worst part of all, they have these terrible homes sometimes. It's just something that we have to deal with on a daily basis as teachers. So, can you be a positive role model? If you can do that, then I think you're pretty set, right? It's not magic though. You've got to work on it, and you've got to be able to pivot and make changes. And then are you let's talk about number 4, right? Are you pragmatic enough to know when a lesson is not working? Because there are teachers who teach lessons and these lessons are dog shit. They don't work. I've taught lessons that don't work, right? You have this plan in your head and you try to deliver and then it just falls flat on its ass. And then in reality, no amount of planning can override the fact that the lesson is boring if you're not engaging. You have to be able to pivot off that too, right? Change the activity, throw in real world examples, or maybe like just skip the whole goddamn thing if it's not working. Because if you're just going to try to stick to this plan that is not working, then you're going to fail as a teacher, right? I mean, you can find out if you want to be a good teacher by, go volunteer in a classroom. Like get your hands dirty, be a sub. Have you ever been a substitute? Try that. Right? I know you're in high school, you're a senior. Once you graduate, you can try to apply to be a substitute teacher. Go be a substitute teacher in a classroom and then see if that's going to work out for you. See if you can like handle that. And then, reflect on that. Reflect on your own learning. And then ask your parents. Ask your parents or even the teachers you have now if you think you'll be a good teacher. Try that too. And then just kind of write it down and say, like, am I going to be a good teacher? Like, why or why not? Right? So let me kind of give you the bottom line here. Teaching is worth it if you're willing to, one, put in the work, because it's not a get paid for a free gig, right? You'll spend hours of planning, grading, doing all that. And two, can you accept the reality that kids are going to be boring and disruptive and occasionally brilliant? And you have to adapt to that. And three, can you own this responsibility, right? You're not just passing on knowledge, you're shaping how an entire generation thinks about language, society, and themselves. So, if you answered yes to all the other things, then you're probably cut out for it. But if not, then you know what? You're still in high school. You can change. It's time to you can pivot, right? You can do other things. There's other jobs and careers that your value, that value your love of English, but won't make you sit in front of a room full of teenagers struggling with concepts. And remember, AI isn't going to replace you, right? It's just a tool. Your job is to use it in a way that makes sense to you and your students, not the other way around. The real value comes from a teacher who can guide and ask questions and think critically and write their own stories. And if you can do all that, then yeah, you can be an English teacher. It's going to be worth it. You'll be fine. And remember now, if this is not for you, don't be afraid to make that change. But I would say give it a shot and try your best. Good luck. Okay, let's get to our next question. This question is from a person that says, I am so physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, and it's only November. Little things have been pushing me over the edge recently, like students not listening or them standing up when they should be sitting. I'm tired of them asking me why whenever I ask them to do something or stop doing something when they're not supposed to be. I've been stressed out so easily that I take it out on the kids, and I don't like that about myself recently. Okay, you're a high school teacher on the brink of a full blown meltdown, full blown crisis. So why don't we just get to the meat of it? First off, you're not a saint, right? You're human, and your brain is on the verge of this crash, this hardcore crash. The quote unquote students not listening part, that's classic, right? They're doing what every kid does when you try to run a classroom like a well-oiled machine. Yeah, they're gonna stand up and they're gonna ask why, and they're gonna throw in a lot of these questions you're not ready to answer. It's the same old shit that has been going on since the dawn of education. And every single teacher has been through that a few times. And the problem isn't that the kids are being bad. The problem is that you're not giving them a clear, consistent structure. Because when you raise your voice or drop a why bomb on the kids, they'll see it as an invitation of go push your limits. And then you can say, you're tired of them asking why, and then you take that, right? That you take that out on the kids. And that's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you're acknowledging that your frustration is bleeding into the classroom. That's good, but on the other hand, you keep letting it build up and you'll turn to the very thing you're trying to stop. So the first rule is you gotta set boundaries before you get fired up. Like, where's your classroom management skills in all this at the very beginning of the school year? You gotta tell them in this very firm voice that if I'm gonna ask you something, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna listen and then actually enforce it. The kids won't get a free pass if you start flailing around. And no, you can't just let them stand up for the rest of the day because I'm tired. That's bullshit. You can't do that. So let's talk about that student in your classroom that has maybe a significant needs, right? Special needs. And you're being stretched so thin that it feels like, you're on this tightrope over a pit of lava. And the state mandates, they pile up. They say you got to do all these things. The curriculum is changing fast and then, you're not alone in feeling like this janitor cleaning up after a tornado. And the key to this, right? The key is to prioritize and delegate. So, prioritize the students who need your help most, but also delegate. Like, for example, if you have a teaching assistant or a co teacher who can take on some of that heavy lifting, hand that shit over. It's not a sign that you're weak. It's a smart use of those resources that you've been given. You want a Thanksgiving break that's coming up. I mean, it's November. Honestly, yeah, you deserve it, right? But that doesn't mean that you should drop the ball on all of your responsibilities and let these state mandates pile up like a snowstorm, right? Take one small step at a time. Plan a 30-minute block each day to review the new changes and figure out what you can realistically implement. That's all it takes, okay? So, let me give you a quick framework that's kind of worked for me in a little bit. So, I used to do this 5-minute check-in. So every morning I sit down for 5 minutes, and at our school we call it a review and preview. Let them know that we have expectations for the day. So I have this screen that's called a dashboard. Let's call it a dashboard. It's a digital screen where I put everything I'm going to do. So you have their expectations on the screen. Like today we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And then I have, this moment where they can look at it. The second is there's a no question time. So there's times where I'm giving a lecture. I don't take questions, right? I'll say save all your questions for when I'm done with the lecture. Write all your questions down and then we'll have that answer time. All right. But while I'm doing something, there's no questions. 3, we do a teach back method, right? So, okay, after you explain a concept, I like to say, tell me what I just said or explain it back to me. Because when a student can explain back what you've just done in their own words, then you know they've learned something. It also gives that kid a sense of ownership and reduces a lot of this why noise, right? Why? They've explained it back to you. You've taught it to them and they can explain it back to you. All right. Fourth, I kind of talked about this earlier, delegation. So identify a student that in your class that's like a high performing student, and then have that kid maybe like help out the other kids that aren't doing so well. That kind of frees up a lot of this time. Like in groups of students, you'll notice there's always this one or two high performing kids. Use that kid to help out his friends. And then finally, set this set care point. And what I mean by that is set this non-negotiable fifth, break every day that you have. For me, it's lunchtime, and then I have this recess time where students are not allowed to come in and ask me questions or bother me. Like that is my time. And then I go to the gym. I have a prep period, and I go to the gym with my one of my coworkers. Like we go, that's our routine. We go to the gym, knock out our workout, and come back to work. And so now you're thinking like, Oh, Howard, yeah, this sounds great in theory, but I'm already exhausted. That's probably what you're thinking. See, that's the first excuse that I can't do it because I'm tired. So the truth is, you're always tired. You're always going to be tired because you're trying to do too much all at once. And if you keep that mindset, nothing's going to change. And here's the brutal part: stop blaming yourself for everything. Okay? Don't blame yourself because the state's making changes or the students or the curriculum. They're all just components and factors that are outside of your control. You can't control what kids take your class. You can't really control what the state mandates that they have to be taught, right? Your control is how you respond to them. Okay? That's where your control is. And being a teacher is about adjusting to all the chaos and then still delivering this value. So, if you're on the verge of a breakdown, take a breath. Okay? Remember, these kids are not your enemies. They're a mirror of society's current state. Yeah, it's messy, it's noisy, it's 2025. A lot of things are fucked up, but they're in desperate need of guidance. And you're the one that can give them that structure if you first, set it up for yourself. All right? Okay, you got this. And if you can't, at least you'll have a clear plan for the next week that won't make you feel like you're drowning in paperwork and tantrums. That's a win, man. That's a win. Okay? Go put your boundaries up, get those in place, take a break when you need to take a break, and then you can do this. Power through. All right? Good luck. Okay, so our last question is: did you find new friends after leaving your old slash toxic friends behind? Uh yeah. Yeah, I have. But holy shit, it wasn't overnight, right? And let's be clear, if anyone listening thinks this shit's instant, congratulations, you're living in Disneyland Fantasy Channel, right? Look, when you bail on toxic people, the first thing that hits you is not joy. It's not, wow, I'm free. It's boredom, it's silence. And then it's silence when you've been in chaos for so long. It feels like depression. When I dumped a few toxic people off that I don't- that were super bad, I gotta be honest. Like my first feelings were a little sad. Like I don't talk to them anymore because they also associated with people I knew, right? And those people were good. And then you sit there thinking like, you know, maybe they weren't so bad. But yeah, they were bad. See, the problem you're thinking about, and probably I was thinking about too, is this withdrawal adjusting because your body got used to that fucking batshit crazy cult like mentality. But here's the thing though, right? Healthy people don't come at you like bomb squads of drama. They don't. They don't do any of that. They don't demand and good healthy people, don't demand constant emotional processing. They don't need you to pick up sides every Tuesday over who's mad at you. Healthy friends show up in like subtle, boring ass ways. It's like, hey, you want to grab coffee? Or hey, I saw that movie and it was great. Or it's my kid's soccer game. You want to go tag along? And if you're sitting there like, is this is this what functioning adults do? Casual small talk and nobody tries to sabotage a friendship because of an Instagram story? Yes, apparently that's true, right? But here's the real kicker, right? You don't need to find new people until you stop chasing the feeling toxic people gave you because you think you miss them. But actually, you miss the adrenaline of constantly being on edge, right? You miss that chaos and it was familiar and it made you feel relevant. And when you get used to peace, then better friends finally have room to exist. And it was like, I had to mentally put a damn yard sale, everything must go sign on my expectations of what friendship was supposed to feel like. And then, slowly, new people slid into my life. I have, new teacher coworkers that I hang out with and new parents that go to my kids' school and colleagues. See, people who didn't need me to solve their identity problems or validate their bullshit every day. These people came into my life. And yeah, sure, sometimes I'm a little nostalgic, for the old shit I used to go through, for the old memories. I get it. But you know what? Fuck it, man. Nostalgia is a liar, right? It's selective as hell. Like we never remember, all the bullshit, all the fighting. We remember that fun concert or that one inside joke. Huh? But if you look at the full timeline of that toxic relationship, those old friendships were like buying a secondhand car that always breaks down and you keep fixing it because you sunk so much time into it. Not because it's worth fixing, right? So, to answer this damn question in one sentence, yes, I found new friends, better friends, but I had to sit through being lonely for a little while. And that empty space tends to freak people out. So they relapse back into this toxic circle because boredom feels scarier than pain. But don't do that. Sit through that awkward silence. Sit through that awkward quiet. I know it's going to suck. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And I know it's going to feel like you're starting from zero at your old fucking age or whatever the case may be. But then one day, right? You're sitting at a table with people who don't drain your soul and you realize that the silence you were scared of is actually what healthy feels like. Do that lonely period, all right? It's the toll booth you have to drive through to get to the good shit. And yes, you'll make new friends, but you won't notice them at first because they aren't screaming in your face. And that, my friends, is all the annoyed adulting we have time for today. I hope my unfiltered thoughts gave you a laugh, a nod of agreement, or at least made you feel a little less alone in your daily annoyances. Remember, if you've got a burning question, a perplexing situation, or just something that you really want to grind your gears about, send them my way. You can find details on how to submit your questions in the show notes. And don't forget, you can find the Annoyed Adult Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, stay annoyed, stay awesome, and I'll see you later. Aloha.